Brilliant. Okay, I found this unbelievably difficult, Andy, to think about which 5 things I should talk about. So they will be quite random. I'll share a little bit about the story, how I found out about how bad are bananas. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change had a meeting in Edinburgh, and early days, I went along just to sort of get a sense of what people were doing in the space. And I met 2 young activists and told them about the idea for paw print. As you said, paw print's all about focusing on what an individual can do about the climate agenda, like encouraging, supporting, educating, but celebrating what people can do rather than bemoaning what we can't. And doing that very much based on scientifically valid information. And I told these 2 young activists about the idea for paw print, and they said, goodness, that sounds very similar to How Bad Are Bananas by Mike Berners-Lee. Have you read it? And I said, is that the guy who invented the internet? And which everybody says, but it's his brother. And then read the book, and it very much was the book of the business that we were wanting to build and that we are building actively now. It helps you understand how literally everything you do, every decision you make, has some form of carbon impact. And if you want to look up, the various options within, any category of your life, it does that. Obviously, with paw print, we're taking it a bit of a sort of different spin on it. We're hoping that people within businesses will work together. And funnily enough, Emily, to your point, we'll work in groups because the science makes it very clear, and the experience of our non-exec who built a comparable business in health and well-being proves that people are more likely to make change if it's a social norm. And if I'm in the same group as you, Andy, you, Emily, and you, Sale, I'd be more likely to do stuff because I don't want to let you guys down, type thing. So How Bad Are Bananas? I'd encourage everyone after this to have a read. But I'm going to walk you through 5 of the things that I think are interesting as tasters to you, hopefully, reading that book and having a play with paw print. So let's crack on, Andy. So I think the first thing is that it is incredibly difficult to get to where we need to get to. The carbon footprints vary tremendously in different parts of the world. I think the biggest ones are in the US and Australia. We're pretty high as a developed, rich country. There's a real correlation between wealth and carbon impacts, and African countries' carbon footprints will be tiny, although in poorer countries, they are, in fast developing countries, they're growing fast, whereas in larger countries, we're starting to come down as we use more renewable energy, not just directly, but also in our supply chains. So the average carbon footprint has come down from, I think, 13.1 to 12.8 tons. Mike postulates in his latest edition that we should be targeting getting down to 5 tons, but that for most of us is very, very hard to achieve. And I'm saying that speaking as someone who's tried giving up a car, going plant-based, stopping flying, doing all the sort of classic big things. It doesn't get you there. So we've got a hell of a long way to go. But in true paw print spirit, we shouldn't beat ourselves up about that. We shouldn't judge one another about that. We should just start to use paw print, learn about the science, talk about it, socialize it at home and at work, and start taking steps in the right direction. We can't do this all ourselves, not least because we've all got our share of national infrastructure. So first takeaway, we've got a long way to go. Second point is that it is definitely not always obvious. So how bad are bananas? Most people, when you say that to them, most sort of mainstream folk will say, oh God, are bananas bad? There's this immediate feeling of guilt that things have a carbon footprint, and these things that we've taken for granted for years are inherently bad. And the great thing, and this is typical of Mike, is he's such a decent man, and he gets the tone right, understand, like pushing us, but also understanding that we're all human and that life has got to be worth living. Anyway, bananas are actually a fantastic source of calories, and the reason for that is that they grow naturally. They come in their own natural packaging, and although they come from very far away to these shores, they travel by ship on a per unit basis. Shipping's actually not too bad. So bananas are significantly better source of calories than meat and dairy. And I think it's worth talking about tomatoes as well. We've all got our different quirks. I'm naturally a big tomato consumer. And in years gone by, I would have gone into a supermarket, seen British tomatoes and Spanish or Moroccan tomatoes, and immediately reached for the British ones, primarily because I thought that was the environmentally friendly thing to do. Also, a splash of, supporting my local community in there. But the reality is that it depends very much on the season, because even factoring in those shipping costs, those tomatoes that come from Spain and Morocco, particularly in the shoulder seasons or in winter now, because they can be grown with less energy, whereas the ones in British greenhouses, are heated, albeit from an increasingly renewable energy source. The more eco choice there can be either not to have those tomatoes or to have them from other countries. So there are some odd little quirks in the data there that are maybe sort of trivial, but sort of start getting you thinking about these things. And obviously I've become a little bit geeky about it over the years. So lots of little anecdotes like that to come across. Next point is that we've chosen, I'm quite a numbers oriented person, and I think giving people their paw print, which is very much a number, and subdividing that into the different toe prints of home, diet, travel, and other spend, is about helping people to prioritize what really matters. My dad got obsessed with all of this and started to, have not sleep because he was trying to work out how important it was to change from a plastic toothpick to a wooden toothpick. I think, the numbers help us to get perspective and on the number, but it is worth taking them with a pinch of salt. So this is a decent example, because it's purely about the energy used. A battery hen egg will have a lower carbon impact than one that's done, in a more ethically defensible way. Free range organic eggs. So these numbers are, I think, really important, but people need to do what they think is right and not take things too literally. That's the key point I wanted to put across there. I've referenced this before, but there are certain things, the roads we use, the energy infrastructure that powers the NHS. These are things that it's very difficult for us to influence directly, that we will just share. And I think the point here is that whether you like it, that there are different things that we as individuals can do. I think, we can change our own behavior. We can work with the direct spheres of influence we have. We are focused on helping people agitate for change in an increasingly assertive way, shall we say, in the workplace. But the fact that we've all got this shared national infrastructure means that we very much need to come together and vote, protest, do whatever we can to in all these different areas of our lives. I don't want anyone to have the impression that at Paw Print we think it's all up, we're putting it all on the individual to make sacrifices and live a less good life. It's much more about making the science digestible and helping people understand what they can do, that they have varying degrees of power to make this change in lots of different ways. And then, the final one, I guess I've done that terrible thing of referencing a few of these early on, but just that all the things that we do will have some form of carbon footprint, and even the little signals that we give off, that will have sort of ripple effects on that as well. So one of the things that we did, we had a paw print meal out, can't remember when it was, everything's a bit of a blur, but we'd ordered too much, and one of us pulled out actually it requested a takeaway box so that the leftovers could be taken home and not put in the bin. And then I think we did a walk the next day and shared out the food at the top of the hill we went up. And my point really is that one person choosing to make that decision, do something that, you might think it's weird or that people would think that you were poor or desperate, or that it was inappropriate to ask for a doggy bag to take home. But I think these signals are an important part of saying that everything we do and everything we don't do, show the way to other folks. So yeah, Andy, I feel like I've rambled quite a lot there. We've got a summary of the different things that are important, but hopefully that's a taster of both paw print and of how bad are bananas. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Christian. I know it's really tough to fit such a dense book and an important book into 5 key points, but done a wonderful job there. Thanks so much. So round of applause, Christian. Thanks. Yeah, I picked up how bad are bananas, I think, last week, and digging through that, I found like sort of 5-ton lifestyle fairly, or like measuring it in tons fairly nebulous. I don't really know what a ton of carbon looks like, or how I would produce that. But I think I might have got this back totally wrong. I think early on the book he says a return flight from the UK to Hong Kong is like 4.5 tons of your CO2 budget. So you've blown like 90% of your budget just in one flight if you're looking to. Is that roughly right?
Yeah, flights are an absolute killer. And I think the real thing, one thing that's quite interesting when we're dealing with our corporate clients is business class and first class, because they take up so much more space, maybe like 3 times that. So we've had some awkward moments where, the big idea was that the top tier in one of our corporate clients were all going to go be, completely transparent on their paw prints. And then they saw the numbers and they were like, we can't do this. But we've had some breakthroughs recently with other CEOs starting to share what they're doing and be sort of vulnerable about it and getting tremendous responses. So some of the numbers are scary. The flying ones really, really, really tough for people who,
well, sometimes it's essential, but I really like the tone of the book and the tone of how you've expressed yourself today. It's not like shaming people or beating them up. It's just like making people aware of numbers, and it's not quite as obvious as you might think. And I like the spoiler right at the start of the book that actually bananas are okay.
Yeah, bananas are good.
How bad are bananas? Bananas are okay. Could have been a really short book.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you.